Yes, thank you, Céline, and thank you to Guillaume Touton and the whole team for having us today. Very happy to be with you. We miss traveling. So I'm running Château Haut Bailly, which is a classified growth in the Grave and in the appellation of Pessac-Léognan. It's a very old property because it exists since many centuries. The Grave region is for sure the birthplace of the vineyard of Bordeaux, and there is a particularity. It's a region where we make red and white wine, although Haut Bailly is an exception because we only produce red wine. Haut Bailly has a few specificities. One of them is that we are a property which is 30 hectares large and which never changed size since Firmin Le Bailly, the French banker who fell in love with the existing vines in 1630, gave his name to the estate. And it's quite rare to have kept a property around the chateau in a single block which never changed size in 4 centuries. It's really quite unique. We do have a majority of Cabernet Sauvignon, also, of course, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, but there is a particularity. We have very old vines on the magical hillock of the estate, on the heart of the estate, and those old vines are probably 120 years old, and it's a mixed plantation of 6 different grape varieties, and it's, of course, the heart of every single blend at the estate because it's so powerful, so complex, really exceptional every single year. So Haut Bailly is also American owned since my family sold the estate in 1998 to Bob Wilmers, who used to live in New York before he passed away in 2017, and it is now his wife Elizabeth and Bob's son Chris Wilmers, who lives in Santa Cruz, and Elizabeth children, the second generation with all of them, who are owning the place.
Right. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I find that pretty interesting. It was actually your family who ran the estate, who owned Chateau Haut-Bailly, and now you still managed to stay involved, you know, your family having owned it prior, and when Bob Wilmers purchased it in the 90s, you stayed on board. So that's quite an interesting and intimate history between the two families.
Yes, I'm actually the 4th generation of the previous family owning it. My great-grandfather had bought Haut Bailly in 1955, and my grandfather Jean ran it from 79 to the time he sold. And when I actually I came for 100% of my time for Bob Wilmers because even in my own family, it couldn't be a girl. Remember that 25 years ago, you had almost no woman in this industry. So it's not that long ago. And you had to be a crazy American to trust a young girl.
Well, we're glad that he kept you on board. Can you go back to what you were speaking about before? Pessac-Léognan is an appellation that's quite well known for the red and the whites, but specifically for the white wines, the top white wines in Bordeaux. But at Haut Bailly, as you mentioned, you only produce red wine, and you have a couple different labels which we can touch base about later. But can you explain the reasoning behind that? Is it more of a historical reason? Is it more because of the specific terroir is really better suited for Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot? What is the reasoning behind that?
Yes, the terroir of Haut Bailly is definitely a terroir for red wine, although we produced in the 18th century some white. So we found tracks of white wine in the 18th century, so we did it at a certain time. And the estate we bought next door, Château Le Pape, is also a red wine terroir. So we are dedicated to red wine. I would dream to make a white for sure, but we would need for that to find the right plots and the right soils. Pessac-Léognan has this reputation of making beautiful white wines. Remember also that overall in Bordeaux before 1970, the majority of wines produced from Bordeaux were white. So, you know, Bordeaux has permanently adapted itself to and changing the grape variety, adapting to the climate, adapting to consumption. But Haut Bailly has really been dedicated to red wine since a long, long time. Yes.
Quite unique.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking about that, so you produce 3 red wines at the property, and recently you restructured the line, renamed some of the wines. So I think it's very important to tell our viewers how the lineup has changed, because some people are looking for La Parde, for example, which has a new name now.
Yes, so Chateau Haut Bailly exists since a long time. You all know that, and it's been classified with the Grave classification in 1953. And we created actually it's my great-grandfather Daniel Sanders who created the second wine in 1967. So we were kind of a precursor, because you didn't have many second wines. Most of the second wines were born in the 80s, if you remember. So we created the La Parde de Haut Bailly in 67. La Parde, you might not know what it means. La Parde is actually the name of an old grape variety of Bordeaux. So it was called La Parde or La Pardotte, and it was a kind of Malbec. It was not very qualitative, but nobody knows that. But during 50 years, between 1967 and 2017, during 50 years, we called that second wine La Parde de Haut Bailly. And with the 2018 vintage, we changed the name for Haut Bailly 2. It's quite simple, but very efficient, because you can pronounce it in every language. The label is very pure, very Haut Bailly style, very, very simple in a way. And the 2 has different meanings. It means it's a second wine, so it's very clear. It also means that the second generation of the family Wilmers is coming on board. Well, you can imagine lots of things, but we are actually very proud of this label. And it happens to be a success. I think people are very happy in a restaurant to have this label on the table, because it's a reflection of the Grand Vin. The quality is very high. It has always been very high, but it's even higher since we call it Haut Bailly 2. And it's definitely a wine you should look for. And then we created the third wine, which used to be called Pessac-Léognan. And we created it in 1987, when everybody started to make second wines. We actually decided to work on our selection even better. And this Pessac-Léognan existed during 30 years, so between 87 and 2017. And in 2008, we decided to change the name for HB, very simple, with a smaller label, but also more modern, maybe. And it's a simple wine, but very well made. You can enjoy it quickly. You don't need to wait for ages. And it's a great price value. So it's a nice range of wine. You have different time of consumption, HB being the one you can enjoy the quickest. Haut Bailly 2 is a wine that can age 20-25 years. And of course, Chateau Haut Bailly can last a century in the greatest vintage.
Hopefully we're here to enjoy it. And in terms of the style, has Haut Bailly 2, is it essentially a continuation of what La Parde used to be in terms of style, or did you make any changes?
It is a continuation of La Parde, and let me explain our philosophy for second wine. It's what I call a true second wine. A true second wine, for me, it's 2 things. The first thing is when you work the vineyards exactly identically for the Grand Vin and the second wine. That means we start the year in the vineyard and we don't know what will do the second wine. We try to make as much first wine as we can every year, and we treat the vineyard equally. So that's very important because it means we don't have plots where we have higher
Okay.
yields dedicated to the second wine. So this is really, in terms of quality, it's extremely important to understand that. And the second thing is that the second wine is a process also of selection, because we have the third wine. So everything which is not qualitative enough to carry the strong name of Haut-Bailly will go in the third wine. So that's I think extremely important to understand that we consider it's a true second wine, and that's why we are very proud of the quality. Of course, with the new name, it pushes to be even more strict with the selection and the quality. So if you'll be able to taste the 2018 or 19 or even 20 vintage, I think those wines would have gone in the Grand Vin 25 years ago. So the second wine of today are the first wines of yesterday.
Okay. And I think it's also important, as you said, to note for the second one for Haut Bailly too, there's a selection even on that, since you have a third wine. So it's a very serious second wine. For those of you who haven't had a chance to taste Haut Bailly, it's definitely a great place to start with either Haut Bailly 2 or the HB. And can we circle back again to the old vines you were talking about? Because I've had the pleasure of visiting the estate a few times, and I know a special part of the tour is always seeing these very, very old vines. Can you tell us a little bit about those and the varietals that are there?
Yes, you know that in Bordeaux we are making blend wines, and what you probably don't know or don't remember is that in the past the blend was done in the field. So it's only since few decades that we are planting separately the Merlot, the Cabernet Sauvignon, and the Cabernet Franc, and so on, and that we are harvesting it separately and vinifying it separately to blend them afterwards. Those very old plots are a reflection of what people were used to do in the 19th century, and the blend was done in the field. So it's actually extremely complex to have 6 different grape varieties all mixed, because each grape variety has its own maturity process. The Merlot, of course, are the quicker, they start the earlier, and you will have to harvest them first. And the Cabernet have 1, 2, 3 weeks difference with the Merlot, depending on the vintage, the year, and the climate. So it's quite complex to have a vine where, a plot where every vine has its own life, its own speed, its own rhythm. And my grandfather, yes, to manage is quite complex. And my grandfather used to harvest them all at once, and it was already exceptional. It was always the heart of Haut Bailly. But since 2000, we are actually sorting them during the harvest, and we are first harvesting the early grape varieties, and then we let the late grape varieties ripening a bit more, and after a few days we come back to harvest the late grape varieties. So we gain in precision, of course, doing that. It's not simple. It's almost like if we were harvesting like in Sauternes, but this tree, this way of picking added some precision in our blend, actually.
So that means that the 6 grape varietals are, of course, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab Franc, Petit Verdot. And so you have a little bit of Carmenère and Malbec. Those are the last 2?
Yes, absolutely. The recipe of Alcide Bello des Minières, who was an amazing character, an amazing owner, was to have 1/12 of Merlot, 1/12 of Carmenère, of Malbec, of Petit Verdot, of Cabernet Franc, and 7/12 of Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's still a majority of Cabernet Sauvignon, but he had this way. And what we do today is that every time vine dies, we replace it with the same grape variety. So we keep the mixity, we keep the complexity, because it's really a patrimoine which is exceptional.
And of these 120-year-old vines, what would you say, what percentage of the final blend does it make, more or less, in Haut-Bailly?
Depending on the yields we have for the rest of
Right.
the estate, it can be 15 to 20% of the blend of Haut-Bailly.
Okay, that's significant.
It's significant. It's really important. And what is fantastic is that those old vines, they have a very constant yield. You could imagine that they produce less. Maybe they produce 30 to 35 hectoliters by hectare, and we are planted at 10,000 vines per hectare. So it's not huge. But if it's a difficult year, they will still produce at 30, 35 hectoliters
You can
by
count
hectare.
on them.
They're always there. And they are extremely consistent. They are always performing. They never disappoint us. I'm fascinated by those vines.
That's awesome. Let's change gear a little bit from the vineyard to the cellar. So you guys have been under construction for a little while, but it sounds like everything is all said and done. The renovation is complete. You just finished the new winemaking facilities. I'm going to pull up a picture here. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and kind of the vision and what that impact will be for future wines of Haut Bailly?
Yes, it's an amazing project actually, and the architect had heard that at Haut Bailly we consider that the vineyard is a garden. So in a way, this building, which is not really a building, is a continuation of the magical hillock of Haut Bailly. So we are located on the highest point of the appellation, and we go even higher with this new place, which is actually an amazing tool, very functional, but extremely discreet from outside and completely integrated into the environment. So basically from outside you will see a garden, and everybody who comes at the moment has a feeling that this garden has always existed. So we are very happy with the result because it means, you know, it's perfectly integrated. And all the external characteristics of this garden on the roof and outside have actually qualities for the inside. So the building had been certified, we call that HQE, Haute Qualité Environnementale, and we got the mention excellent for that because it takes into consideration everything, energy, natural light, all the process had been thought in order to be extremely environmental friendly. So it's both extremely functional tool with lots of innovation and fabulously aesthetic. So the result of this combination, we are very proud of actually, and very happy to use it.
Well, it's funny you use the word discreet because when I was, looking through the pictures for what to show, this is about the best one I could come up with because it's, like you said, it's very discreet. You almost don't see it there. So on the right, you have the chateau, and then just there on the left, it looks like just a hill, really, but that's the winemaking facility, which I think it's stunning.
Yes, we actually, it's one of the very first picture. The garden has grown since then, and we will have more pictures next summer. But yes, it's very well integrated, and you see on this picture the barrel cellar, which is actually 10 meters down. We did for 10 meters, and it has fabulous characteristic in terms of temperature. We almost don't need to use the air conditioning. It's naturally cool, So, and this is the vinification cellar with the vats. What you don't really see is that we have 3 circles of tanks. It's extremely difficult to make picture of a round building because this room is completely round. So around on the largest circle, you have stainless steel tanks, and then you have inside two two circles of concrete tanks, which were designed by our architect. And each tank has a different size. So everything had been thought to work, to let us work even more precisely for the future, you know.
And for the Grand Vin, are you using a mix of stainless steel and concrete, or it just depends on how do you decide what
Yeah,
you
we
do?
always love to vinify in concrete and stock the finished wines in stainless steel. But of course, we also do vinify in stainless steel. So it has actually two functions, two different functions usually. But the stainless steel we have, this new stainless steel is fantastic. It comes from the pharmaceutical industry and it's extremely easy to work with it. So we even use less water to clean the tanks thanks to this new material, which is ultra performing.
Yeah, it truly looks beautiful. Last time I was there, it was just a big hole in the ground. So
You'll have to come back. Everybody has
I
to
know.
come and visit it because it's an amazing building. Because when you look at picture, well, it's nice, but when you come and visit it, you get some emotion. You will see it's extremely. It's almost like a cathedral, and the acoustic, all your senses will be hooked by this place. Actually,
It sounds magical. Um, Moving on to the famous picture with Haut-Bailly, which I'm going to pull up here, and I will explain it briefly because it's a little bit hard to see. But I remember this being a very interesting point of the visit at Château Haut Bailly. Actually, Veronique, why don't you explain the picture a little bit, and I can try to point out the chateau if it's too
oh
hard to
yes,
see for people.
that's when I started at Haut-Bailly, I wanted to understand the past better because my grandfather didn't have really a serious history on the estate. So we worked with a historian, and we are about to release actually a beautiful book in the coming weeks about the whole history of Haut-Bailly. And she found out that Haut-Bailly has an amazing and very strong history. It was always owned by charismatic people, extremely strong characters. And one of them, Bello des Minières, the one who planted the old vines, succeeded to sell Haut-Bailly at the same price as the first growth during probably more than 70 years. So between 1870 and 1940, let's say. And one of the first books about the Grand Vin de la Gironde, the great wines of Bordeaux, which was published in 1903, and which had a different page for each chateau. The first page of the book is what you see on the screen with the top 8 of Bordeaux at that time. So in the middle of this star, you have Yquem, of course, and then you have Lafite, Latour, Margaux, Aubryon, Ozone, and two outsiders on the side, Mouton Rothschild and Haut-Bailly, which was known to be a cru exceptionnel. So it's a beautiful golden edge which explain actually the strengths of the terroir of the estate, which explain also the positioning of Haut-Bailly many years ago, and that which explain also why collectors or wine lovers love so much Haut-Bailly, because they know it's a fabulous terroir and which can perform extremely well and consistently, whatever the vintage is actually.
Don't get any ideas on the pricing for the 2020 en primeur, please.
The first wines are, I mean, the first classified growths are in another galaxy. So, but it's nice to remember the past, to understand the present and build the future. I always consider that, you have to be faithful to your DNA. You have to be yourself, and that's extremely important, I think, to understand the whole process. And that was an eye opener. The work we did, and you'll find it in this book, which will be official in a few days.
Oh, wow.
It's actually extremely interesting to understand all that.
Well, it also goes to show the strength of the brand if you want to speak in more in those kinds of terms, you know, even back then it was really ranking up there clearly among the first growths. So
yes, for the ones who are usually drinking Haut-Bailly, thank you for doing it, because I think it's wonderful to know we share something and we have a common passion. And for the ones who never tasted Haut-Bailly, well, imagine that it's a wine which has a very elegant style with lots of power but smoothness at the same time. It's very soft, very silky tannins always. So please do try it, and don't hesitate to come and visit us, to write us, or we will be happy to send you any information you need. We also have a lovely guest house at Le Pape next door, so you can book a room and enjoy the chateau life whenever you want, whenever you'll be able to travel.
yeah, those seem to be the questions. When can we come visit? So as things open up, that's definitely, if you get to go to Bordeaux, it's a must see on your trip. And as Veronique said, they have beautiful guest house, and we're always welcomed so nicely at Château Haut-Bailly. So thank you very much, Veronique, for taking the time. I know it's a little bit later in France. Thank you for taking the time to present Château Haut-Bailly and take us through the history and what makes it such a beautiful estate, producing amazing wines. We love carrying these and selling your wines. So thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Celine, and hope to see you all very soon.